Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. You know, we get a lot of books in the mail here at United Press International, both here in Los Angeles and our offices in New York, and Jay Saper's office in Chicago, and the big headquarters back in the big building in Washington, D.C., and we just can't read them all. But when this one crossed my desk, I had to stop. It's called What the Animals Tell Me. The woman who has written the book is a vivacious, interesting, articulate woman with an incredible story to tell. I call her kind of a modern-day Dr. Dolittle. Her name is Sonya Fitzpatrick, and she joins us here in Los Angeles. Sonya, it's an interesting book. There are so many segments of it. I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain why you love animals and how you can, in your words, talk with them. But you have such a delightful accent. Tell me about your background.
Oh, gosh. I'm from England, as you can tell from my accent. And I was brought up in the country in what they call the Midlands, Northamptonshire. And, well, we all speak that this way, but I don't have an accent. We're like, well, it is a class system there, and I was fortunate to be brought up middle class.
Well, let me ask you something. I remember when Benny Hill would be shown over here, his concept of an American accent was either a Texan like this or someone with a radio announcer's accent, as I have, where
Yes.
it's kind of artificial. My concept of the UK accent is there's one that I can't understand at all.
Oh, that's terribly, terribly British, darling, with the
is
old
that?
boy stuff
Is
and
that
wacko and good show and all of that.
Is that
Otto?
is that wealthy?
That's usually, yes, you know,
Or
that's
just putting
usually...
on airs?
No, it's well educated.
Okay.
You know, it's usually people that speak with that accent are extremely well educated and...
It kind of has a walrus. It's, you know, and there's some great comedy skits about that, but that's
Yes.
the one British accent I dearly love. When we were talking before going on the air, I used a phrase that I learned in London last year. I was fascinated by the London subway, and you keep hearing, mind the gap, because they don't want you to fall...
That's right, down the side of the subway.
Down the side of the subway. The book is called What the Animals Tell Me. Again, when I think of Britain, I think of a wonderfully more genteel society with a lot of gardens, a great tradition in pets, particularly dog breeding over there. How does that all fit into your background? Is this a new thing to you to try to get into what animals are thinking, what they're telling us?
No. When I was a child, I was born deaf, and I was brought up in the English countryside. And people often ask me how long I'd been talking to animals. Well, with having the deafness, my parents didn't find out because I was born during the war and times were pretty hard in England. And I was brought up in the country. I was very fortunate. My father was a businessman in the village. And there's a lot of that in my book about my childhood. And, of course, I was with the animals all the time because people would raise their own animals for food. Mm-hmm. And my father was a grocer and he had a number of other businesses. And I grew up. Really, I could always hear what the animals were saying to me, but I couldn't hear what human beings were saying to me. And I had a very close bond with animals, and I could speak their language.
Now, you're not deaf now.
Yes, I am.
You are?
Yeah.
Everything is lip reading.
Well, I have a 70% hearing loss in one ear and an 80% in the other ear, and I normally wear a hearing aid, but my doggies ate it just before I came away.
Your doggies ate it?
Yeah, they ate my hearing aid. So I lip read, but I can hear when we're close like this, and I also have acupuncture, which helps tremendously.
Well, I don't want to dwell on that. It's just that you are one of the few legally, clinically deaf people whom I've talked to who shows no signs in their speaking voice of having limited hearing.
No. Well, I've always I have to be honest with you, I've only in the last 2 years worn a hearing aid. And my grandmother taught me to lip read. My grandmother taught me because she was in the Lancashire cotton mills and the noise of the machines was so strong that they all used to lip read. So living with my grandmother, I learned to lip read very early.
That's so funny. They could talk to each other over the din.
Yes, they did. I didn't feel any different. I thought everyone talked to animals because as a child you don't feel that you're any different. So I was told that I constantly lived in my imagination. And I thought the other world that I heard the animals in was my imagination. And we're laughed at today when people, we're always taught that imagination is fantasy. But if we didn't have imagination, we would create nothing in our lives. It's the greatest gift God has given to us, one of them.
Let's draw a baseline
yes.
here. And I want to find out where you're coming from as far as your feelings about animals.
Mm-hmm.
How many cognitive skills, thinking skills,
yes.
do animals have? I'm thinking specifically of a story my grandmother told me that when her father died, out in the barn, their dogs started howling
yes.
at the moment he died.
Because they speak telepathically and they speak in picture and feelings. And we are, because we have the faculty of speech, we don't, and that explains everything for us. We don't understand how powerful we are. We are giving off energy. Everything gives off energy, whether it's trees, plants, animals, or humans. And we also have electromagnetic fields that run through the body, as the earth plane does, and animals do. And we are literally transmitting out rather like a radio. And when animals speak and when we think of anything, we're picturing. And that picture goes out telepathically and the animals receive it. So animals receive the picture sometimes before we've even spoken. So the animal would know, and you would also feel the sadness because we're transmitting out sadness as well, or happiness, or whatever we're feeling. The energy is going out, and this is transmitting out. So the animals speak in picture and feelings.
Some months ago on this program, I interviewed a fellow named Gary Davis,
yes.
who has written a book about dyslexia.
I am dyslexic,
You
too.
are. He says that dyslexic people tend to think conceptually rather than hooking words together as we do.
Yes.
And we were talking about the fact that if a person had never heard language, how would they think? If a lion comes in the door, they wouldn't think, quote, "Oh my Lord, it's a lion, it will eat me." They would go, "Yeah," and run without trying to put anything into words. He says that people who speak in concepts are by and large brighter and quicker than
yes.
people who are hamstrung, tied down, if you will, to language.
That's interesting because also dyslexic children and people visualize pictures very clearly, and that I understand now is why I could speak to animals, because I was receiving the pictures from them.
Well, now you say you spoke to animals.
Yes.
Were you just a small child and a dog would come up and you'd say, "Hi, how are you?"
No, I had lots of animals around me, and we had animals. My father raised animals, and so we had dogs that lived in the house and used to sleep in my bed with me, and there were birds, there were chickens, there were geese, and I had 3 pet geese, which the story's in my book about them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were I was closer to them than my brothers and sisters, the animals. I love them. Sometimes I think more.
You start off talking about a pig. A good friend of mine has a pet pig.
Oh, they're terribly intelligent.
Yes,
they're wonderful.
And I know the television show Green Acres. They
Yes.
had a pig, but it was multiple pigs. They keep,
Yes.
But that pigs are smart.
They're very smart. All animals.
But they've just got a
species are
bad
smart.
image.
Well, it's what the human puts onto them, isn't it?
Yes.
Humans think of them as, you see, we're all spiritual beings. We just inhabit a different physical form. And because animals are in a different physical form and we're in a human form, doesn't mean to say that we're superior. And I think every animal has a right to live. And I think they don't have any right to be eaten. I'm vegetarian, and I don't think we have any right to enslave them. And because animals are living, feeling, breathing, incredibly sensitive and feeling. They have everything that human beings have, and it's known that a dog's brain is structured very similar to our brain, and that when we're on all fours and we get down on our hands and knees, we are just like the animals.
A lady who you might call a modern-day Dr. Dolittle, Sonya Fitzpatrick, the book What the Animals Tell Me, on this week's American Montage. And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.